New in the January release of Photoshop 2026 is the Remove Tool Model 3. To start, I'll enable the Remove tool from the toolbar and loop around his arm to remove it. Include the shadows and give it enough room to generate the arm on his side. Once you come back to where you started your selection in Release, Photoshop will fill in the loop automatically, and in a few moments, it'll give us a fantastic result. This model also includes improved reconstruction of complex structures, better pattern recognition, and improved symmetry. To show you how this works, I'll loop around the fire escape, a loose selection works, and Photoshop removes it almost instantaneously. It generates similar looking windows with the same perspective, and it matches lighting and depth. The results are not perfect, and you can always continue making adjustments to the areas that need them. Let's now remove the cars from this photo. Again, we'll loosely loop around them with the Remove tool, and Photoshop will remove them very fast and give us realistic results. And the best part about all this is that the Remove tool uses generative AI technology, but it does not use up your generative credits, so you can use it as much as you like. My name is Jesus Ramirez. In this video, I'll cover all the new features in the Photoshop 2026 January release. Let's start by looking at the two new adjustment layers. From the new adjustment layer icon, you will see two new adjustment layers at the top: Clarity and Dehaze, and Grain. Let's look at the Clarity and Dehaze adjustment first. On top, you have the Clarity slider, which adds punch and texture without really changing the overall brightness. In this case, making the elephant pop. But Clarity can get you into trouble when used in portraits, making skin look rough and harsh. Instead, when working with portraits, drag it to the left to smooth skin. The other slider in this adjustment layer is Dehaze, which is designed to reduce atmospheric haze by increasing contrast and saturation in a highly targeted way. Notice that as haze decreases, contrast increases, colors deepen, and shadows become heavier the further I drag to the right. By dragging this slider to the left, you will add haze, a nice creative effect you can add to your photos. In this case, dragging the Dehaze slider to the far right destroys the sky. So you can create a targeted adjustment. First, delete the layer mask, disable the adjustment layer, then select the background. Then go to the Select menu and choose Sky. Now press Ctrl-Shift-I to invert the sky selection and select the buildings. Next, enable the adjustment layer. Select it and click on the new layer mask icon to create a targeted adjustment layer that only affects the foreground. Now, enable the adjustment layer and drag the Dehaze slider all the way to the right. This adjustment will affect only the buildings, bringing them into focus without destroying the sky. Now, I pushed the slider all the way to the right just for the purposes of the demonstration. I wouldn't go this extreme on a real project. And of course, you can apply other adjustment layers to help improve this image, like the recently released Color and Vibrance adjustment layer. You can reduce saturation and use the eyedropper to neutralize the image. Just click over an area that should be a neutral gray, like the building here. And by the way, if you want to learn more about masks, check out my Mastering Selections and Masking course. The link is in the description below. Now, let's look at the second new adjustment layer in this release. From the new adjustment layer icon, choose Grain. The Grain adjustment layer allows you to add aesthetic noise designed to add texture, break up smooth gradients, and make digital images feel more organic. I use this often when creating TV and movie posters. Let me show you what I mean about making images feel a bit more organic. I'll zoom in. Notice that this blur background is far too smooth and not very realistic. Real photos will have some level of grain even in smooth areas. I'm also using many layers to create this composite, and by adding noise, I'll make the image feel more cohesive. The noise helps unify the image. Next, let's compare this adjustment layer to the Camera Raw filter. I'll use the same settings on both. And in this document, I have both the Camera Raw filter adjustment and the grain adjustment layer. Notice that they're exactly the same. Obviously, the grain particles are in different positions, but the image looks very much the same. This grain adjustment layer gives you exactly the same result as the Camera Raw grain adjustment, and it's fantastic. I highly recommend that you use it in your composites. Now let's look at the brand new Firefly Fill and Expand model. I'm working with a document that is 2560 by 1440. That is the new 2K output resolution. To show you how it works, I'm going to click on the Generative Fill button. And from this icon, you can see all the image models available in Photoshop. The new one is Firefly Fill and Expand release January 2026. And this model is much better at generating humans and animals. Before we look at it, let's compare it with Firefly Image 3. I'll select it, and from the prompt box, I'll simply paste in a prompt and I'll generate. The prompt reads, a smiling man sitting next to a large white dog. The man is wearing a blue denim jacket and brown khaki pants. Urban setting during golden hour. And as you can see, Photoshop generates 3 variations. And it's important to point out that they're not very realistic. Look, we have issues with the dog's collar. The dog's facial features are not very good. There are also problems with the man's hands and his face. Not a very good generation overall. And the same is true for the remaining 2 generations. Neither are good, especially when you zoom in and look at the details. Now, let's look at the new model and see how it compares. With the generative fill layer still active, you can go into the Properties panel, and from this drop-down, choose the brand new Firefly Fill and Expand model. And I'm going to generate using exactly the same prompt. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat that this new model is not perfect. It still creates issues, especially when generating images from scratch. But it's definitely much better than the previous one. You can see the results here. Much better details on the dog's face and on the main subject. But when you analyze the image, you will come across other issues like his watch here. This does not look realistic at all. So definitely look out for imperfections like this. Also, I'm not liking the way these pants look. Let's look at the other variations. Again, much better detail with the dog's face and with the main subject. Maybe an issue here with the fingers, something we would need to fix if we were going to use this image. And this is the final generation. Again, the faces in both the main subject and the dog are much better, but we still have other issues throughout the image. In my experience, partner models work best when you're generating an image from scratch. Right now, my go-to is Google Gemini 3 Nano Banana Pro. Having said that, the new Firefly model is incredibly useful. In fact, it works much better when editing small details in the generative fill workflow and, of course, expanding images with Generative Expand. Firefly models also use significantly fewer credits, 1 credit versus 10 or 40 depending on the partner model. But again, the biggest reason I use Firefly models is that they handle certain tasks very well, like removing or replacing objects and expanding images, which frankly makes a lot of sense given what the model is designed for. Remember, the name is Firefly Fill and Expand. Let me show you what this model does best. Let's work with one of the images we generated a moment ago. In this case, I want to fix the watch. To do so, you can create a selection around it. I'll use the rectangular marquee tool. Then, from Generative Fill in the taskbar, I'll choose the new Firefly Fill and Expand model, and simply type in a prompt like a brown wrist watch, and then generate. Remember, when you use a Firefly model, Photoshop will look outside of the selection for context to help you generate the content, which generally gives you a much better result. Unlike partner models that only use the content of the selection to create the generation. In this case, Photoshop does a fantastic job with the watch, and of course, you can cycle through the variations from the Properties panel to see if there's any better results. And this is the real power of the Firefly Fill and Expand model. It generates fantastic results that are based around the contents of the selected area. Let's now look at how this new model works with Generative Expand. And by the way, remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you learned something new. To start, I'll go into the image menu and choose image size to show you that we're working with an image that is over 5,000 pixels wide and almost 8,000 pixels tall with a resolution of 300. This is definitely not a small image. Now, the goal here is to expand this image to make it wider. And to do so, I'll enable the crop tool. It's best to work on one side at a time because you're generating pixels for one area instead of the entire image, giving you results with better resolution. I'll only work on the right side, but then you can repeat this process on the left. So with the crop tool active, I'm going to drag the handle and expand the image. Then click on Generative Expand, and from this icon, choose the Firefly Image 3 model first. This is the older one so that we can compare the difference. I'll click on Generate, and Photoshop will generate the content on the right side to expand the image. And everything looks fantastic. However, once you zoom in, you will see that there is a big difference in resolution. Look at all the detail on the left and not much detail on the right. Even if you hover over this icon and click on the enhanced detail option, you'll notice that the detail is just not there and the results are not very good. Now let's compare this with the new Firefly model. So I'll choose the Firefly Fill and Expand model from the dropdown, and I'll generate one more time. And this will simply generate the content on the right-hand side using the new model. And as you can see, the results are much better. It's not perfect, but definitely a huge improvement. Look at the difference between the old model and the new model. Much, much better. Also, when you're making these kinds of comparisons, I would recommend enabling the zoom tool and then right-clicking and choosing 100%. That will give you the best visual representation of what's going on in your image. Again, in this case, there's a lot more detail in the original image and improved detail over the old model, as you can see. So still not perfect, but much, much better. Also, if this were a real project, something I would recommend is fixing any imperfection. For example, in this case, I will enable the rectangular marquee tool and just make a selection on the bottom portion of the image like so. This is so that I can focus the entire 2K content on this area. The seam is really not noticeable in the areas with very low detail, like in the blurred background. So I can simply go into Generative Fill, leave the prompt blank, and click on Generate. And in a few moments, I'm going to have a new generation, and in theory, this should give me better results in the area with more details. So again, we're looking at the image in the 100% view, and the results in terms of detail are better. Not a perfect match, but it may work for the project you have at hand. Let's now look at the reference image command in the new Firefly model. The goal is to replace this long sleeve shirt with this polo. To do so, we need to create a selection out of the shirt. There are a couple ways of doing it, but I prefer the old method, and let me show you why. You can, of course, go into the object selection tool, and under select people, you can select the main subject and choose upper clothes. And this will, in fact, select the shirt, as you can see, but it misses certain areas like the top of the sleeve here and other areas in the image, which can potentially create issues. So what I like to do instead is simply use either the lasso tool or the selection brush tool and just make a very loose selection around the object you want to replace. That way you don't miss any areas and we don't create any issues with the generation. So I'll simply lasso around the shirt. And once I come back to where I started with the object selection brush and release, Photoshop will fill that in. Now I have a selection around the shirt and I can go into Generative Fill and click on this icon. By the way, it's only available with the new Firefly Fill and Expand model. If you switch it to any other model, notice how it's disabled. So you need to be in the new model. Then click on this button. And from here, choose an image in your hard drive. I already have that polo shirt saved, so I'll double click on it to enable it. You're going to have two options. First, reference to. What are we referencing, the object or the whole image? When we have object selected, notice that Firefly automatically removes the background so we can see the checkerboard pattern here. If I choose whole image, Firefly will reference the entire image. We don't want that. We just want the object, so the background gets removed and we only have the shirt. What is our intent? To place it into the selected area or to swap it to the selected area? In this case, we want to swap the shirt. So I'll select that. Notice that Firefly does not allow you to type a prompt in with this feature. So all you need to do now is simply click on the Generate button. Firefly will look at your reference image and use that to generate a new shirt over this man. The results are pretty good. Notice that we have short sleeve, just like the reference, and things are looking pretty good. I would say that biggest drawback at the moment is that sometimes you don't get realistic folds on the shirt. Notice how the shirt looks very, very smooth without any folds. None of these results look realistic. So that is one of the things that I would change. You can, of course, fix this by using one of the partner models, but I think this defeats the purpose of using this feature because you could use a partner model to accomplish the same goal. Just for the sake of the example, I'm going to show you how to fix this with a partner model. So I'll enable the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to hold Shift, click and drag to create a perfect square. You get better results that match the background when you have a perfect square like so. Then I'm going to go into Generative Fill, and I'll change the model to Gemini 3 with Nano Banana Pro, and I'll simply type the prompt, add folds to the shirt. Then I will generate. In a few moments, we're going to get exactly the same shirt, but with folds. And there we go. You can see that the shirt now has a lot of folds before and after. If these folds are too intense, you can always reduce the opacity. You can click and drag on the label to reduce the intensity and find something that works for you. What I would do at this point is select the layer mask and fill it with black. Black is my foreground color. So I can press Alt and Backspace, which fills with black, in turn hiding everything in that layer. Then I can press the B key on the keyboard to enable the brush tool. And with white as the foreground color, I can paint over the mask to selectively bring back some of the folds. Now, you might be thinking, can I replace the shirt that he's holding with the polo? Unfortunately, Photoshop doesn't always do a good job, especially if your reference image doesn't have any folds or is not hanging. Let me show you what I mean by that. With the shirt selected, I'll click on Generative Fill, change the model back to Firefly Fill and Expand, click on the reference image, choose an image, and I'll choose exactly the same polo, and I'll use the same settings, object, and then swap the selected area, and I'll click on Generate. Now, Photoshop will replace the shirt, but it won't look very realistic. It's going to look hard and not necessarily soft like fabric. See that? The shirt looks completely solid, and the same thing is true for the other variations. So unfortunately, not the best result if we're trying to replace the hanging shirt. Now let me show you another thing you can do with this feature that may not be obvious. What I'll do now is go into this road image, and I'm simply going to enable the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to make a very large selection, like so. Then I'm going to go into Generative Fill, click on this icon, and choose an image from my computer, and I have this image of a shoe. Then I'll press Open, and once again, I'm going to reference the object, not the whole image. I want Photoshop to remove the background from that reference image. But this time, I'm going to choose Place into Selected Area. So Photoshop will composite that shoe onto this image. And the selection will determine the scale of the shoe. So we're going to have a giant shoe on this road. And this model changes the perspective of the object to match the background, as well as matching the scene's lighting, which makes it look like it really was sitting on this road. In this case, this variation is not very good, but the first two were not bad at all. Now, in some cases, you may get a hard edge at the bottom, like in this generation. This is where the edge of the selection was, so nothing was generated below. But this is very easy to fix. All you need to do now is create a selection on that bottom part, then go into Generative Fill, leave the prompt blank, and simply generate. This will generate the shadow that should be in that area. And there we go. Just choose the variation that works best for your image. Next, I'll go into this landscape image and I'll create a smaller selection. Remember, the selection controls the scale of the object it generates. I can click on Generative Fill, click on this icon to choose a reference image. I'll select the same shoe and I'll leave the same settings, reference to object and an intent to place into the selected area, and I'll generate. In a few moments, we're going to get a fantastic result with the shoe in the water, but we're going to have a similar issue as we did with the shadow. Notice that the reflection of the shoe is not showing, but we're going to use the same technique to fix it. But before I do that, I'll show you the other variations. The shoe is facing the opposite side in this case. And of course, the shoe's perspective, angle, and lighting change to fit this new scene. So I'll zoom in. I'll press M to enable the marquee tool, and I'll just make a selection here on the bottom. I'll click on Generative Fill, leave the prompt blank, and I'll generate. And of course, this will generate the reflection missing in this image. Just select the variation that you like best. For something like this, I would recommend viewing the image at full screen and then choose the variation that works best. In this case, probably variation number 2. Let's now look at a new feature in Photoshop Beta, and that is dynamic text. Let me show you how it works. To start, I'm going to enable the horizontal type tool, and I'm just going to paste some text. Now, the first thing I want to point out is this works best if you don't have line breaks. So what I'm going to do here is just remove the line breaks from this text. So now, without line breaks, I have just one long line of text, and that's what I want. Also, just to make things look a little better, I'm just going to click on the all caps button. Now, what is the new feature? Well, you can enable the horizontal type tool, and you'll be able to access the new dynamic text features from two places. First, by clicking on this icon from the options bar, or in the properties panel, you can scroll down and you'll see that here under dynamic text. This lets you convert regular text into dynamic shapes so the text flows automatically along a path such as circles, arches, and bows. Now, this first option has been in Photoshop for several months now. It just creates a block. When you first enable it, you won't see a big change because we have one single line. But if you enable the text layer and scale the text box, you can see how the text inside will automatically resize so that it fits that new container. The new feature in this version of Photoshop are the next three settings, starting with the circle option. Once you have your circle, you can of course reposition it by using the move tool and scale it to make it larger, like so. Also, when you have the horizontal type tool active and click inside of the text, you will see three icons. The X, which indicates the starting point, the diamond, which indicates the midpoint, and the circle, which indicates the ending point. And what you can do now is hold the Control key and reposition these. So I'm going to click and drag on the circle and drag down to the bottom here of the moon. And now the text is going 3/4 of the way around the moon. See how it starts here, it goes all the way around, and it ends here where I drop the circle. The midpoint is now over here. You can also hold Control and drag the center point to the top. I'll drop it here in the center. So now the text starts from the top of the moon and it goes halfway around to the bottom side. You can also hold Control and drag on this midpoint and decide where the midpoint starts. So maybe we'll put the midpoint here right about 1 o'clock or so. So now that we set the midpoint, the starting and ending points readjust accordingly. And you can hold Control and drag inward to move the text inside of that path instead of outside. I'll hold Control and drag up, and now the text is on the outside. The two remaining new settings are arch and bow. I'm going to select the move tool, drag this down. Once I go back into the type tool, you'll notice that I have the starting point, the ending point, and the midpoint. And of course, I can hold Control and drag on these icons to change how the text fits within the path. Next, let me show you a pro tip. You can go into the direct selection tool and adjust the anchor points of that path, which will change the shape, and the text will automatically conform and stay dynamic, always fitting the text within the start and end points. And to edit the start and ending points, enable the horizontal type tool, click within the text, hold Control, and drag on these points. You can do the same with the ending point, and of course, drag up or down to change the baseline of the text. I want you to keep in mind that this is just a regular vector path. So when you enable one of the vector tools, you'll be able to edit the path just like you would any other vector, including using the curvature pen tool to add additional anchor points and adjust the starting and ending points to make sure that the text flows across the entire path so that you get better results. If you ever get into trouble editing the vector path, you can always come back into the dynamic text presets and click on any one of those to bring back the original path. And again, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you learned something new. And check out my Mastering Selections and Masking course. The link is below. I'm Jesus Ramirez. Thank you for watching.